Good day, everybody, and welcome to another in our In Conversation with Graeme Codrington series. Today, I'm in conversation with Rapelang Rabana. Rapelang, it's great to be chatting to you. How are
It's
you handling
absolutely
lockdown?
awesome. To be honest, Graham, I'm loving lockdown. The introvert in me is delighted to be at home. And I think the world has rebalanced to finally suit the lives of introverts. So I'm loving this life.
We've been preparing for this our whole lives. Eh? I'm an introvert as
Exactly.
well.
Exactly. So I think the extroverts now are feeling pain, but when we go back to normal, they must remember how much we have adapted to their world.
Exactly. Well, look, I'm. You can see I'm in a virtual world at the moment. That's clearly not my home behind me, but I'm loving just being able to play on my own in my office
Yeah,
and kind of transport myself virtually to other spaces. And in fact, that leads nicely
that's
to
cool.
our topic
Mm,
today. Is we want to talk about digital transformation and
mm.
all things to do with digital revolution,
Technology,
4IR,
yes.
all the cliches. And it's great to
Exactly.
have everybody along. So if this is your first time joining me for one of our In Conversations, why don't you just pop along to the chat box off to the side there and just say hi and let me
Mm.
know where you're from. It's great to see a few friendly names. There are a few people, Evan, Steve, Sandra. I think you've joined me on a few of these conversations. And today I'm
Wow.
really excited to chat to Rapelang because this is a topic that I think is absolutely essential. Once you're over the crisis of
Mm.
dealing with the COVID disruption and you begin to start setting your mind towards what comes after COVID is over, and it will be over
Mm.
at some stage. When we're not sure, but 2-3 years time, we'll be into the rest of the 2020s.
Yeah.
And I am convinced, and Rapelang, I know you agree with me on this. I'm convinced that the digital disruptions that were
Mm.
coming our way will actually have been accelerated by COVID. That all of the stuff we have been talking about for the last 4 or 5 years
Mm.
is going to be right there in front of us, and we're going to have to deal with it. Is that what you're seeing as well?
That's definitely my belief. And I think it's true for more simple reasons, really. It's really because COVID has forced us on a personal level to feel change. And we used to think that life was defined the way we do our work, how we engage with our clients. All of this has been set for decades. And now, when people are forced into an environment where everything, their family life, their work life has to change, people become a lot more open to further change, to now really try that innovative idea or try that other experiment where the inertia and the habits were stopping so much of that before.
And Rapelang, this is what you do. So for people
Yes.
who are not familiar with you, I've put your website at rapelang.com into
Great.
the chat box. So go and have a look. But
Mm,
you describe yourself as a technology entrepreneur. This is what you've spent the last
yes.
decade or more doing, is looking for some of these changes before they
Mm,
come, then tagging, looking for where the technology solution is, and kind of riding that wave
exactly.
into different industries. What are some of the experiences that you've had over the last 10 years that
Mm.
you really, how do I phrase this question, that maybe you wish some of your clients had listened to you a little bit more 2 or 3 years
Oh
ago,
gosh.
because you were
Yeah,
telling them what was coming, and
sure.
now they right in the middle of it, this
Now they're
digital
right in it.
transformation journey. Yeah.
Totally. I'm Graham. So for the last 15 years, I've really been building technology businesses. So I'm a digital native, as they call it. This has been my life. It's the only adult life I know, technically. And in my first business, we started by solving problems that we faced as students. We never had money for phone calls and the like, so we built a voice over IP client on mobile phones because Skype didn't work on phones at the time. And that got us into the telecoms industry. And 15 years ago already, Graham, we were telling the telcos that your core revenue in terms of voice, GSM voice, is ultimately going to decline. And
Yeah.
you need to build a services business around all your customers. And we had built an amazing hosted PBX platform with 1 million and other services to try and get them into the thinking that when voice declines, you will need to be able to charge for subscriptions of services. And these all need to solve customers' everyday problems in the enterprises that they have you in. And it didn't quite land until now. So in the last 3-4 years, now the telcos are feeling the pinch. Now they're looking to diversify into financial services and other industries. And it's unfortunate because if they had started, 10 years ago, the new innovative businesses would be at scale by now, and they wouldn't have to see this decline in voice revenue affecting that broader revenue.
It's fascinating you talk about that. Traveling around the world, I realize, and I know we've got people from all over the world watching this video, but in South Africa, the data costs are just ridiculously expensive. I think it was at some stage, might still be the most expensive data in the world. Certainly, it's the most expensive data in Africa by far. And I actually think that that's counted against us a little bit during the last few weeks of COVID. I've got friends in Malawi, in Kenya, in Rwanda, who are telling me wonderful stories about, how they've really accelerated their data usage. Whereas in South Africa, I've got friends who are desperately saying, please e-wallet me 200 Rand, I've run out of data. 200 Rand should buy you data for 3 months, not
and
for
it
1
doesn't
week.
quite the same. So we still have that challenge.
What do you think is going to happen in South Africa just with data? Do you think this will put pressure on the telcos?
I think this will definitely put pressure on all stakeholders, and it's not just the telcos in my mind. I think that what we've seen in the education environment, where we've told all schools to go online, yet so many families and communities can't afford to go online for schooling. It's become quite clear that unless the Ministry or Department of Education provides or subsidizes this infrastructure, it's not going to exist. And now the utility and the benefit of having internet has been made starkly clear by the impact of COVID, because people have been excluded from services by not having that infrastructure. So I'm hoping that post this conversation, government policy and allocation of resources is going to put internet into one of those priority resources, much like water and electricity, that we can't live without in these kind of times. And I think we've already seen a number of the dynamics in the telco sector, where I think was it one of the operators had to announce, the reduction rates and some competitive fines being paid. So this is only going to accelerate in my mind, because the pressure is on. We've got to provide that road for people to deliver services and get utility from the internet.
So let's then talk about the companies that are on the other side of that, the companies who want to provide services. I am constantly disappointed by apps that I see and online functionality of companies who are patting themselves on the back and saying, look how wonderfully digital we are. But all they've really done is they've taken what they were doing and they've created a website for it. And sometimes they've even gone backwards in the service they're providing. When they put it online. I mean, this must be a frustration you see all the time.
Yes, especially in the sector I'm in now. I mean, in Rekindle Learning, we are doing a lot of work in the learning and training space. And we've seen the horrifying translation of digital during these times, where companies that were doing the in-person workshops, are just having the Zoom facilitator in the front, dishing the same content and expecting people to stay online for a day or 2 days straight, which is crazy. It's you needed to reconfigure your whole offering significantly. And luckily we're able to help some companies do that. And when we look at that kind of mindset, Graeme, for me, it always comes back to the reality that a lot of people look at this concept of digital technologies as, something on the side. And that makes them want to just adapt and take their old thinking and any old technology and layer it onto their business without going back to the beginning of that business and saying, actually, what is the key thing that we need to fix here? Where is the goalpost of success? And with the advent of innovation and COVID, that goalpost of success moves. At some point in time, people were happy to pay for 30 people in a room for someone to sit in the front and tell them something. Now the goalpost of success is different. A company will want that knowledge to be traceable and trackable. They will want that impact to be monitored on the job. And it's no longer enough to just dish out that information that we've been doing before. And we need to make sure that when we look at these digital technologies and opportunities, we're going back to first principles of how do we actually render a better service to our customer? Because you'll find that the companies that are not doing a good job on the digital are just putting a nice, pretty interface at the front. They haven't looked at the entire customer value chain and said, where are the friction points? Where are things actually falling apart? And making sure that the technology they provide links to all of those parts that are having some friction, so that you provide a much more compelling proposition, as opposed to here's an app or here's a WhatsApp interface that doesn't solve the customer's journey and the job that they're trying to do.
Absolutely. One of my favorite examples of that is to say, how could my doctor do better if my doctor had access to all of the data that I'm now currently gathering? So I've got a Fitbit on my arm. I Instagram every meal I eat. You know, I can track my steps. I can take sleep measurements. If I then gave all of this to my doctor, would my doctor be able to anticipate when I get sick? And of course, now the COVID disruption is forcing people to think about this, because you've got these tracking apps, for example, where I can get an alert if somebody I'm about to get into contact with has got COVID or is suspected of having COVID. And I think over the next few months, we're going to get very used to telemedicine and proactive medicine. I'd much rather my doctor phones me and says, Graeme, you're about to get sick, rather than me phone my doctor only after I've got sick. And I really think that there's space in the medical world to rethink how you engage with your customers, with your patients.
Yes, exactly.
Actually having a healthcare system rather than a sick care system, which we've got.
Sick care system. Exactly. And I mean, you give a great example, Graeme, because the way people need to understand technology better, from my view, is that it's simply a means to give us a capacity to understand what is happening, to be able to diagnose that problem, to be able to predict what will happen in the future and inform our decision making. So all of these technologies, AI, IoT, are actually all contributing to that. So if I don't have enough data to understand, having a tracker is an IoT device that gives us more data to be able to understand, or a sensor in your fridge, or more advanced machinery in your cars. All of those things are giving us capacity to understand. And then we've got to use the data analytics to filter out the anomalies from that data that will actually tell us the things that we need to focus on, because there's obviously a huge amount of data and not all of it is actually useful. And that's where the machine learning and the AI is going to come into play. And then ultimately to be able to predict what is going to happen and how we make those better decisions. So from medicine to driving cars to how we build bridges, we're using all of that technology to help with those conversations. And when you look at it like that, it's a lot simpler. It's not the scary concept of IoT or AI or anything else like that. It's all a means to create greater transparency in how we live and how we do our work, so that we can make that diagnosis and prediction better.
But it also sounds to me as if we lose our way if we make the technology the main thing. It sounds like you're saying the main thing needs to be solving somebody's problem or frustration or dealing with a human issue. And then the technology is just the means to do that. Do you think too many people have got lost in buying shiny toys and buying technology
100%.
rather than...
I see that in education all the time. We buy laptops and we put them in a classroom and we think kids will just get smarter by osmosis, without interrogating the learning experience and what aspects of learning are actually going to be improved. So that's definitely a big challenge, that we focus on the shiny bits. And I always want to start a conversation when we talk about digital transformation, a step back, because it's simply a mechanism we use to solve business problems. So the way I like to frame it is that digital transformation is simply looking at how we improve our revenue streams, how we reduce our costs, how we improve our customer experience, and how we improve our employee experience and culture. And all of these technologies need to be targeted at the business problem. And the key diagnosis at the beginning is to determine what is that business problem that's going to give us that extra 1% or extra 10% performance, and rally around to that point to deliver the solutions. Don't start with, do we need an AI team? Do we need an IoT team? Do we need a X team? That's not the question you should be solving at all. The question is, which of those business problems do you want to tackle right now?
But then how do you help a company not get stuck in
Yes.
only fixing what they already do? Because that's also a danger, isn't it? You want people to also realize that they can imagine a whole new way of doing things. Maybe an example here to help people understand the question is, a driverless car is cute and it's interesting and it's fun, but it doesn't really change the system. The system only changes when every car is driverless, because then the system, the AI between the cars, can come up with a better traffic pattern. So the danger is we only invest in driverless cars to make the single car experience better, rather than seeing an ecosystem that can be revolutionized. How do you get companies to not just get stuck fixing what they're already doing?
Sure. The question I would want to answer first is whether what they're already doing is still a sustainable business. And if it is still a sustainable business, then by all means, let's just make it prettier. Then we would do what I call just digital enablement. Let's clean up some of the interfaces for the clients, the employees, because your core business is still strong and it's still sustainable. It's when you need to ask yourself, can we still be in this business in 5 years or 10 years time? And is there an ancillary or adjacent business that we need to start investing in? And then you can go on to a sort of a digital exploration or innovation, as I like to go on, where it's related to what you're doing and it's not a complete overhaul. And if you're already saying that our core business and there's no adjacent services around us that can work, then we have to go into the digital transformation piece immediately, because that's where you have to build that new business, whether it sits outside initially or whether you acquire a business to bring in. And those are the tougher conversations, because the CEO or the board of a business don't want to write their own death warrant, essentially. So it's got to require a very progressive and forward-thinking shareholder to realize that there's value in the current cash cow, but we need to build the new car to actually take us forward, and possibly have separate groups of people working on the different problems and incentivize them for solving those respective problems. But you can't ask someone to keep running a particular engine and tell them to build another engine when their performance is entirely measured by the engine one that was originally there. And that's where companies get it wrong, because you haven't separated the incentives and performance requirements.
You've already answered the next question, because I think a lot of companies are struggling at the moment to know what is the organizational system that will work for them. Do you make one person in the team the digital enabler? Do you create a whole separate team?
All of that. It's complicated.
Have you seen something that works better than something else?
Yeah, there's lots of conversations I have around that. And in my short stint as a corporate employee, I definitely saw how the challenges of trying to change internally can cripple innovation. So I like to think that the first pillars that I think are important, that is not so much where people sit, but a critical mass. You actually need to build up a critical mass up to maybe 30% of staff need to be having digital skills, be able to operate in the new ways of work to actually drive a change in the broader organization. Having one person in an exco of 10 or 2 people in a small department of a 5,000 person company doesn't tip the scales at all. And any change really needs to build a critical mass of people that are going to support the new way of work. And how you organize those people. If you are wanting to drive the innovation internally, I think we do a lot of conversations around the agile ways of work. And a lot of the silos that companies have now worked when we solved problems in a way where we broke them down, and sales would solve that problem, operations will solve that problem, the technical team will solve that problem. But in the new world, those problems are not behaving and sitting in their boxes anymore. So where you've got territorial cultures or hierarchical cultures where people are not allowed to share information, collaborate, to start working together, that's a major failure point of any sort of innovation. And you'll find that those heads or chiefs are fighting with each other for power, for influence, and it thwarts all kind of innovation because you're not allowing those creative processes to start. And the best way to get those collaborative problem-solving teams together when you're still trying to find your way around a new structure is to do what I like to call sort of design sprints, 3 or 5 day kind of things where you've picked a couple of big problems in the business. A range of people across the business are brought in for the conversation, and an external facilitator initially starts how managing and facilitating those conversations. But it creates a framework for people that are not used to working together, not used to engaging, to have that space to do that and experience it for the first time. And ultimately, you can have internal coaches that run these design sprints, but you almost got to create a mechanism that forces people to come together in a cross-collaborative manner, especially in an environment that didn't have it before. And that starts the tipping and the cross-collaborative working going. Makes sense?
Yeah, I mean there's a lot to get our heads around there, I suppose. But the key is, well, let me ask you, where would somebody need to start? And this is now, maybe let's link it back to where we find ourselves. COVID gives us a disruptive moment, right? So we disrupted because it's a work from home disruption. There has been an IT disruption. We all getting used to, well, I'm not sure we're getting used to it, but we're getting overwhelmed by Zoom doom and these webinars and online meetings and so on. But we are being catapulted into a digital transformation is maybe too big, just digital disruption. What can businesses use or do at the moment to kind of take advantage of the fact that you have been disrupted and accelerate some of the digital stuff going on in their businesses?
Sure. So I think that the most important thing that a senior leader can do now is that you can use this opportunity where teams are not doing what they used to do. Staff are not working in the way they normally did before, to introduce new things that previously might have been more difficult to because people were stuck in certain habits and cycles and autopilot. But now that's sort of been shifted and broken. And what you focus on is actually quite easy. You don't have to think too hard to realize what keeps sucking you up your time during the day and comes out of nowhere, even when you don't plan for it. What causes you the most angst and consternation as a company where you're wasting time that people should be focusing somewhere else? That's probably the area where you want to start rethinking something has to change here. What are we not doing? What is a platform or process we should be applying? What new technology can we bring in to solve this particular problem? So what I've done, for example, is I didn't like our internal project management system, and I've been meaning to change it for quite a while. But I've been too lazy. Other people liked what we have, yada, yada. But now I've used this opportunity where we needed to set a new cadence and a way of laying out our work to introduce a new system, because now life is a bit chaotic and changing anyway. Fine, this isn't too bad in the midst of all of this. And that cultural openness or innovation openness is just slightly riper for us to leverage right now.
I like that. I like that thinking. But again, I'm hearing you coming back to saying, start with where there's a real, genuine problem, and just build momentum. So don't start with this big $10 million AI project. Start with a felt problem in the business, either with staff or customers, and build from there. Is that the approach you typically take?
100%. It's got to start with a business challenge. And if you don't start with the business challenge, it's going to be, innovation sort of circus at the beginning, and then everyone goes back to their way of work. because it wasn't tackling a real business challenge. And if you tackle a real business challenge that delivers a revenue or reduces costs or makes customers happier or makes staff's lives easier, then people can sustain the effort and momentum behind it. If it's just a nice idea and it's cute, we'll forget about it in the next project or next hiccup that comes about. And that's why it's so important to align it to the business imperative.
So tell us finally, as I'm just watching the time here, tell us a little bit about the what's happening in education at the moment, because I think anyone who's got kids at school, I've got daughters at university as well, we're experiencing alongside the younger generation some of the disruption in education. But I think I agree with you that when schools go back and universities go back, they'll go back different, because the students will say, I want a different experience in the classroom. And I think that the same will happen in the corporate environment, where people say, I don't want to go and sit for a day in a lecture room where I just get data dumped at me. I could have
done that elsewhere.
What are you seeing in education?
Sure, there's so many dynamics happening in education. I think what we often do wrong is we think that technology in education is one conversation, when there's actually multiple conversations to be had. For starters, I think we've done well to some extent in a lot of institutions where technology has been used for the administration of the school system, the administration of finance and schooling. So attendance registers, reports, and those kinds of things. That's one bucket, which is actually a very, very important bucket. And we're seeing very good progress on that. What worries me the most is that we're not seeing enough interrogation of how we're using technology to improve the learning outcomes. We're doing a lot of, here's a tablet, here's some digital textbooks, and it's basically replicating what has been done before. We're not making it easier for learning to happen. We're not making it easier for the students to assimilate and master that knowledge. We're not making it easier for them to have the exposure and experiences that they need to build a holistic education. And that's where the work really needs to get done. What I often advocate in the work that we do is that learning happens in multiple phases. There's the knowledge acquisition component, there's the practice and the knowledge retention, there's the application and higher level problem thinking and problem solving. And each of those requires very different technology interventions if we're going to actually have an impact. So we focus a lot in the micro-learning, for example, around the knowledge retention. How do you give opportunities for learners to practice what they've just heard about, answer questions, personalize the journey according to how they're performing, and give them corrective feedback? That's good for building base mastery of any topic, maths or science or anything like that. And it reduces the amount of time you have to spend in class doing that. And when you look at high school, I mean, even matric maths, the exams, or grade 9 and 12 maths, actually, a lot of the maths exam is still a large amount of mastery. Can I recall facts and can I do basic application? And if we just fix that in the South African education system, you could see a massive improvement in marks. Problem solving is definitely another category, but it's not actually the category that people are failing on, even in their current matric exams. And there's other technologies we can apply for those problem solving aspects. I'm doing a whole lot of interesting research at the moment into virtual reality and how we can use it to craft experiences that actually stimulate the thinking and the behaviors that we want to see in learners. So for example, could we create a VR experience where someone who's going for a job interview can practice being in a job interview and getting feedback and seeing how they perform, so that it's not the first time they're doing a job interview in the real context. And often we can do that in person, but it obviously depends on you having a great facilitator. Now with VR, you don't have to rely on having direct access to that great facilitator to transfer those skills. And it is those experiential training moments that we need to think more about, because that's where we develop the higher level functions and cognitive thinking capabilities. And it's not possible in knowledge transfer mode. So for me, that's where the conversation needs to go. Which aspect of learning are you focusing on so that you apply the right technology to it?
Brilliant. So if people want to find out more about that, is it rekindlelearning.com?
Correct. At rekindlelearning.com, you can see some of the work that we're doing there. Yes. That's great.
Brilliant. Rapelang, Ronald has just thrown a question here. Those of you who are live with us, you have the benefit of being able to put questions in. And he's just asking, are you finding that companies have put some of their digital projects on hold during lockdown as they maybe think about budgets and things like that, or are things just been continuing?
Sure, there has definitely been a hold on a lot of projects post lockdown level 5 starting, and you will see that most of those were ancillary projects in my sort of experience. It wasn't core to the business right now. The projects that were core to the business, can we sell more? If we're a training business, how are we going to actually run our training? Those decisions and projects have accelerated significantly. And it comes back to that question of, was this project addressing a critical business need, or was it something we thought we should do because it sounds right and it's pretty and it'll make us look good? And you see some of that comparison in what I'm experiencing now in the market. But I suspect that after COVID, those who have slowed down will sort of go back to the drawing table so that they prepare themselves for the next COVID-like situation if they did stop their projects.
Yeah. There's another question that has come in privately. I'm not sure if the person meant to send it privately, but I can see it, so I won't mention their name. But this person is saying they're involved in a church. And what is it that churches might be doing right now? Obviously, I'm guessing they're not wanting to open the church so everybody just comes back again. I suppose it's a similar situation to schools and classrooms. You're trying to get a message across, but you don't just want to sort of do a data dump in a Zoom. Have you got any suggestions?
Exactly. So definitely, you don't want to do that data dump. People do want that human engagement. So you do want that 30 minutes or an hour of someone on a Zoom, but it can't be this whole day thing. No one can afford the data anyway for a whole day thing. And the rest of the time, you want to support them with supplementary material. So even in our world of bite-sized learning, is there something you can impart in a 15-minute learning engagement on a phone, a short video, some interesting insights or thoughts that people can chew on day to day to day? And in that way, you will start to even enhance what people used to do before, because they're not waiting for Sunday to get something. From their community and their church. They can engage continuously. There's other mechanisms where there's a lot of peer learning that can happen in a community. Is there a mechanism for people to share a verse that they've been reading, to make a comment, to get some input, and allow people to teach each other by creating that kind of platform for people to speak on? So there's a number of things that you can do, and I think it's providing the mechanism for people to engage, get resources, and also be able to watch a sermon as required that can support a church activity, I think.
But I suppose that churches have the same problem that teachers have, and that a lot of companies are going to have now is, I think one of the lasting legacies of COVID is that we're going to realize geography is not as important as it used to be. If I can go online and order something to be delivered, it might not be in the local shops, but 3 days later or however long it takes, it arrives at my house. If I can go on a school website and I watch my own teacher teach and my own teacher's bad, I can then just do a search and I can find another teacher from another school who's teaching the same subject but doing it much better. And now suddenly I abandon my own teacher. And of course, the same happened for a church, you know? Why should I listen to my pastor?
Exactly, right?
Sermons are boring. So, I mean, this digital world really asks all of us our game, doesn't it? Everyone.
It does. Comparison is much darker, so you've got to up your game.
Yeah. And which means that if you are not upping your game at the moment, you might look very far behind in just a few weeks or a few months if other people are moving quickly in this digital disruption and you're not, right? Exactly.
And very simple example. I mean, one of my colleagues, their personal trainer, continued to send them the bill for the month, even though the gym was closed, there was no in-person training, and they were offering no alternative. They just expected to be paid. Versus my trainer who says, This is what we can offer. There'll be group Zoom sessions. You can have a one-on-one Zoom session. These are the things that we'll be covering in each. We can offer this discount for the virtual session. Do you want to proceed? So that for me is an example of someone who adapted versus one who was, this is the way it works. I still expect my money and will lose the client.
I saw a hairdresser in the UK go online and give people lessons on how to cut hair at home. And then ask people to give a donation to his website. And I think he's got more than 1 million followers now. He might be making more money teaching other people how to do haircuts.
Exactly. You see,
but Charmaine asks a very important question, and maybe we can start using this just to wrap up a little bit.
Yes.
Across the world, and especially in Africa and South Africa, there is a digital have and have-nots divide. What do we do to make sure that we don't leave people behind? So just a simple South African example. I hope we come out of COVID really having the NHI conversation more seriously. We now realize that everybody is integrated in the health system. If poor people don't have health insurance, it affects the rich people. So we have to have something for everybody. And surely there's a technology solution for giving people SASA grants, for getting people access to telemedicines. And surely the rich people who've got their, discovery and momentum have got these beautiful medical apps. Surely those kind of should spread across the whole country. I know that's probably simplistic, but surely technology is a solution, not a problem, if we can extend it to everybody.
100%, Graeme. And there's so many, hurdles we need to get through to make sure that happens. I think one is the basic access to the internet and infrastructure. It's a journey that every nation has to go on. And I like to remind myself of the story of cars versus roads. There were actually a lot more cars before roads became available. And what I mean by that is that we need to create the services that demonstrate utility that then justifies the rollout of more infrastructure. And what we do in technology as a technology entrepreneur, I believe, is creating those services that demonstrate utility and value. And then when the politicians are sitting in a room, or the big financiers are sitting in the room, they're not asking themselves, people want internet for what? Now they know what people want the internet for, and it's unequivocal. And COVID has made it very clear. So I do believe that it will motivate a lot more investment in that space. And then we're able to get to the next level that you were alluding to, Graeme, of how do we use the technology now to solve those challenges? There's been solutions for the healthcare crisis and education systems for a long time, but the challenge is that the people making the buying decisions themselves don't understand the technology. And what happens when you don't understand something? You put it in a black box and outsource it to a consulting firm to tell you if you should do it or not. It doesn't allow you to actually get the benefits of the technology. You don't understand how you're going to collaborate across different parts of society or even ministries. You're not getting your data, analyzing it and seeing what to do with it, because it's such a weird and black box over there. And we really got to change the people making the technology buying decisions there, because the solutions are there. It's about understanding how to piece it together. And we're not leveraging that expertise right now in those buying cycles. And that's what frustrates me the most.
Well, I'm sure everybody who heard that and is watching us now, why I wanted to speak to Rapelang about this, because I think that we have an opportunity, right? I think that there's a moment in time that will last for a year or two that we shouldn't miss the opportunity to digitalize what we can in our societies and solve real problems. COVID is emerging these problems for us if we didn't know they existed before. And surely there are some technology solutions. So Rapelang, if anybody wants to get hold of you, if they want to get your insights on digital, and that, what do they do? Just go to your website, rapelang.com?
Yes, rapelang.com is where you can find me. I'm also quite active on LinkedIn, and I enjoy a whole lot of conversations around digital technologies. My most popular conversation is how you become a digital master. So essentially, for the employee, for the business leader who doesn't think that technical and doesn't think that innovative, I really want to make that innovation journey more personal and accessible by framing it in the business context so that we can all get on this journey, because it's not just for technical people.
Brilliant. Is there anything that hasn't been said that you think would be valuable as a closing thought?
As a closing thought, just to say that this COVID time has forced us, to stop and reflect, and things that we used to take for granted as being given, as being set, have fallen away. So instead of pushing back against that change, let it grow on you and actually explore what else have I hung on to as an absolute truth that isn't that permanent, that isn't that absolute. And could we possibly change that? Because that's really the beginning of the innovation journey, when you're willing to suspend your acceptance of the status quo, your acceptance of the circumstance, and be willing to suppose something else. COVID has helped you get along, and now you can continue that journey to really drive business in our organizations.
Brilliant. Nothing more needs to be said. I knew this would be a good conversation. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Sure.
And thanks everybody for joining us in another In Conversation session. Thanks, Rapelang.
Thank you. Thank you, Graeme. Take care, everyone.